Yoichi Isagi, the number one of Blue Lock and the core of the squad. Now we are all aware of the fact that Isagi is a great player, and since the beginning of the story he was framed as a cut above the rest in terms of mentality when he was the first to accept Ego's proposal, and the entire series so far has been him trying to live up to the ideals he has for himself. Now throughout the U20 World Cup, the games against France and Nigeria have went out of their way to highlight something about Isagi to us, that being that he truly is the crux of Blue Lock. Now admittedly at first glance, I thought to myself that this was overblown, and I thought that the Isagi dependency issue felt like it came almost out of nowhere. But after rereading the series, I've come to realize that this couldn't be further from the truth, and Blue Lock's Isagi dependency is something that has been building since the very beginning of the series. As I mentioned in the intro, Isagi being the first to accept Ego's proposal was a catalyst that triggered many of the others in that room to join the Blue Lock program. Now of course I cannot say for sure that Isagi is what caused all of them to join. I honestly doubt that that is the case, but what I can say is that it definitely did have an impact. Now at the beginning of the series, Isagi's main threat comes purely from his intellect and mindset. Isagi's physical prowess and technical skill simply wasn't the best, but what made him a threat to the opposition was how he used his teammates to create goals both for himself and others. During his entire stint with Team Z, Isagi was the catalyst that kept them going. During the tag game, his ego drew out Bachira's and they eliminated Kira. Against Team X, Isagi and Bachira worked together to lead to Team Z's first goal. Isagi is who drew out Shiguri's ego as well, and Isagi was always working alongside Kunigami too, which led to him being an integral member on the team. At this point it's clear that Isagi's effect on others is his main characteristic. Yes, he does have his own talents, but it's more so who he is and his mentality that has led to the growth of everyone around him. This is also what caused Nagi to be interested in him. Throughout the Team V vs Team Z game, Isagi would grow into the absolute monster that we see become the number one of Blue Lock at the end of the NEL. At the start of the game, he doesn't do much, but this all changes once Bachira completely changes the atmosphere of the field. After the entirety of Team Z gets a fire lit under them, Isagi starts analyzing the field in order to create the best outcome possible. He's the one that calls out to Kunigami to spur on Kunigami's evolution that led to a goal. Then after witnessing how Chiguri beat Zantetsu, Isagi sees the weakness of that strategy, and once Team V sees through it, Isagi immediately covers that scenario in order to create a goal scoring opportunity which does end in a goal. The reason Isagi was capable of doing this was because he not only saw and internalized all that happened prior, but he grasped the current situation as well, and this led to him knowing that if he can keep the play going, then there are attackers close to the box that can help them score. Isagi turned himself into the winning piece here, even if he didn't score. Later on, in the final play of the game, Isagi takes full control of the attack, and using Kunigami, Chiguri and Bachira, he puts himself in a position to score. After this, Nagi comes in to defend him, but Isagi in the moment analyzes what he needs to evolve, going through all his past experiences, and in the moment, he discovers his direct shot. During the second selection, the main focus was about figuring out and honing your individual weapons so that you can grow as an individual. Isagi in the beginning was focused purely on figuring out how to play, which is how he upgraded his vision and learned how to use blind spots. Once he attained Baro though, his true nature started peeking through. Isagi started completely controlling the field, as in the 3v3 game against Kunigami, Chiguri and Reo, Isagi was completely dominating and exploiting both friend and foe within this match. He realized that Baro was useless, so he decided to completely use Baro as bait while he and Nagi tried to score. He even forces Baro to submit to him and pass the ball, which in turn led to Baro evolving and not only gaining his chop feint dribbling, but a newfound mindset that will continue to carry Baro throughout the series. These instances are all small examples of how Isagi's existence spurred on those around him. The game against Rin would go on to solidify this, as Isagi would completely take over the field. When nobody could keep up with Rin, who was puppeteering the field, Isagi could read everything he was doing. He just didn't have the physical specs to keep up, and throughout the game, Isagi constantly revises his thinking in order to keep up with Rin, and eventually even outplay him at the very end, with the only reason he lost being pure luck. After this we get the third selection when nothing major really happens, but the U20 game continues a trend of Isagi controlling the field. Isagi was a vital part of the attack. From the very first play of the game, Isagi is always ready for an attack and positioning himself as such. When Nagi and Ren are being pressed, Isagi makes a way for himself to receive a pass from Bachira. Now yes, this was stopped by Aiku, but it shows just how dangerous an offensive presence Isagi is off-rip. His connection with Ren also completely threw the U20 defense for a loop and allowed for another goal scoring opportunity to be created, and then immediately following Ren's failed shot, Isagi creates another goal scoring opportunity with Yukimiya. Isagi will continue to be an offensive presence that Aiku has to keep an eye on throughout this game, such as when him and Nagi created a chance for Isagi to score. This trend continues in the U20 game, with Isagi creating a chance so dangerous that Sai had to step in and stop him, and all he's done throughout the game, that Sai calling him the heart of Blue Lock. Of course, there's also the final play that requires no explanation, where Isagi took advantage of Rin's awakening to score his own goal. See, up to now, Isagi intellectually has been great, but when it comes to his plays, he was lacking heavily. Isagi by himself could not perform, and he had to fight to create situations for him to thrive, and this required teammates to make possible. The NEL however forced Isagi into a situation where he didn't have this option. During the NEL, Isagi didn't have a Bachara or a Nagi to help with his visualizations. It was now up to him and him alone to make them come true, since effectively everyone on the field was an enemy, including his teammates. This meant Isagi was starting the NEL on the back foot and had to use this environment to somehow create a winning situation for himself and ideally find a goal, which Kaiser was going out of his way to stop. In the Boccia game, Isagi is still in the same boat as before, since he has yet to truly unlock and master Metavision, so the way he makes his mark on the game is through exploiting the situation he's in. He knows how everyone else will play, so he interrupts their passes to get the ball from Ness, then gets in position to make it look like he's submitting to Kaiser, which throws everyone off, and then he instead passes to Kunigami, setting it up so Kunigami can fire off a shot using his strong leg, and by reading and exploiting the field, Isagi gets an assist. After fully awakening Metavision during Manshine, Isagi starts playing on a whole other level compared to non-Metavision users. With Corona as help, he's capable of running through all of Manshine, and if not for Kaiser, another Metavision user, he would have scored. Isagi being a step ahead of almost everyone on the field meant that he could essentially see all of their plays, at least from a strategic point, coming. This is why he was capable of doing things like stopping Nagi's goal, and he even devoured Chris Prince. Isagi can see everything happening on the field, and through realizing what everyone is good at, knows what's going to come next. Him being one of the few that can do this is also why he was stuck defending so much in the NEL. In the Ubers game, Isagi highlights how only players with superior vision are keeping up with Snuffy, and none of the Bastard München defenders were included in this group. This means strikers like Isagi and Kaiser had to pull back to stop the attack, since conceding goals in the NEL was extremely dangerous. Isagi's ability to read the field and both attack and defend is something that wouldn't go unnoticed by scouts, and they viewed him as a revolutionary midfielder. This is insane glaze when you consider that this is essentially a nerfed Isagi. Isagi at this point was playing with 0 teammates versus Barcha and 1 teammate versus Manshine, and had Kaiser, the best player on the field in both games, excluding the Masters, going out of his way to stop his goals, and Isagi was still playing so well the world considered him a revolutionary player. This is also when Isagi, who is still lacking physically as his body can't keep up with Metavision yet and his mind isn't accustomed to the mental toll it takes. Going into Ubers, Isagi starts showing why he's an absolute demon on the pitch. Isagi at the start of Uber states that his body can finally keep up with his thinking, and having this upgraded body allows Isagi to not only complete all the ideal plays he has in mind, but compensate for his lack of teammates. Isagi at the start of Ubers has 4 usable pieces: Corona, who's actually reliable and useful on attack; Yukimiya, who is an antagonistic force but can be exploited to get opposing defenders off of Isagi; and Kunigami, who is essentially in the same boat as Yukimiya. Then there's Raichi, who is essentially useless to Isagi at the start of the game, but since there's no bad blood between the two of them, it means that Isagi knows that when needed, Raichi will step up and that Raichi also won't unexpectedly get in the way. Isagi also made sure to study up on Uber's tactics for his own strategies, something that I wish he would start doing in the U20 World Cup, and use that to his advantage as well. With all this data inputted, Isagi will completely shut down a pass from Lorenzo and immediately counter and score a goal. Isagi literally ran back, read Ubers' plays, defended, stole the ball, and then ran through the entire team using Corona as support and exploiting Yukimiya, and then even when Ness showed up to try and stop Isagi, Isagi accounted for that and then still scored. Keep in mind that at least half of this, and arguably 2/3 of it, is not his job as a striker. Isagi was just forced into it. Isagi shouldn't have had to defend, and he shouldn't have had to make his own plays. That's what defenders and midfielders are for, but he still does. Isagi won't work for a system, he'll make the system work for him, and that's exactly what he was doing throughout the NEL. After this, Isagi realizes that his entire team is filled with idiots who can't keep up, and realizes the only way for him to score is using someone who actually has a brain, and that's where Hiyori comes in. Hiyori immediately plugged up a defensive hole that Bastard München had, and this freed up Isagi to actually do what he was meant to be doing and go for a goal. Since Isagi no longer had to do all the thinking, could rely on another person, this led to the super goal at the end of Ubers. Isagi, before getting another Metavision user to work with him, basically had to think for the people he was working with, and this was happening as early as second selection, where everyone was simply responding to whatever Isagi did. Now on Bastard München, he had to account for not only that, but the movements of like 15 people working against him whenever he went on attack. Then the nice little cherry on top of it all was him having defenders so useless you might as well have put sandbags in front of Gagamaru and it'd have the same impact, so he had to cover for them as well. Hiyori cut down so much of that work for Isagi, which is why Isagi became so much more dangerous when Hiyori was on the field. Even offensive players like Yukimiya were causing problems for Isagi because they just couldn't keep up with Isagi's thinking. The PXG game highlights how essentially nerfed Isagi was perfectly. He starts the game with Iori and these two are capable of shutting out all of PXG's attacks. This leads to a situation where PXG evolves and Charles and Shido create a super goal. After this, Noah has Isagi, Iori and Kunigami work together to turn the game around, and after ensuring Kunigami will play nice using his Winter Soldier activation phrase, Isagi with just two people completely takes over the field. Iori stops Charles so hard that Charles wants to get subbed off and Kunigami has Shido popping veins, and after all this, Isagi uses both of them to get the ball where he needs it to score. Isagi is finally allowed to play somewhat like a striker this match because Iori and Kunigami are on defense and are passing to him. And notice how in the game where he's allowed to actually play striker like he wants, he has one of his best, if not just straight up his best performance all series so far. The series itself even acknowledges this as after Isagi pulls us off, Corona gets subbed on so Isagi has another player to help him instead of having to do it all by himself. From this point on, Boston Munchen's level of play was only being hindered by one thing: Isagi and Kaiser's feud. Now yes, this feud did allow them both to evolve, but in a game at this high level, all they were doing was getting in each other's way, and the second they decided to work together, the entire team started evolving at a rapid rate. Once Isagi had the entire team on his side, the one problem that he had, which everyone recognized, was Ness. Despite this, Isagi didn't disregard him like everyone else and instead banked on his talent, and that led to the winning goal. Everyone was too assured of the current state of the field, but Isagi saw beyond what it was and instead saw what it could be, like he always does, and that's why this play worked. Throughout the entire Nigeria game, Isagi is constantly highlighted as the main problem on Blue Lock, and this is not without good reason. He's constantly locking down Onazi and he's dictating the plays Blue Lock makes, and this is all ignoring the fact that he hasn't even gotten the chance to attack yet. Hugo even tells us that the other Metavision users in Karasu and Rei are just reacting to what Isagi is doing and then planning around that. The fact that Isagi needs to dictate the entire field is insane because once again, that is not his job, but he's just good enough to do it anyway. Rei and Karasu are the ones that should be doing all the conductor work Isagi is doing, but they simply aren't on his level in that department, and then to make matters worse, he outclasses them on offense too. Even on defense, when Onansi shows up in front of Aiku during the final shot, Aiku literally has to gamble on what he's going to do until Isagi shows up and limits Onansi's options, which is what led to the scenario that allowed Aiku to block the shot and even gave Isagi a new addition to his bag of tricks since Isagi forced an evolution out of Onansi. Now versus France, Isagi had his little mental crisis and he just wasn't playing as well as normal, but what Hugo said at the beginning of the game rings true. Blue Lock up until the France game was skating by on the luck Isagi brought in. Or in other words, the only reason the teams Isagi played on were triumphant was because of all the situations Isagi created. Now with Isagi's current skill level, not only can he create these circumstances to breed miracles, but he is strong enough to no longer have to bear witness as they play out, and can grasp the miraculous himself. In terms of vision and playmaking, Isagi is the best on the team. Yes, I know Karasu had a great game against France, but Karasu was just not as effective as Isagi. Every time Isagi created a goal, he planned for everything around it, including the evolutions of himself and others. Whenever this doesn't happen, Isagi doesn't consider it a personal victory. Isagi technically assisted Kunigami, but he hated that. When Isagi's goal got stolen by Rin, he took it as a sign that he needs to get better. Karasu on the other hand got bailed out by Baro during one of his plays. Karasu was betting everything on Shido and had absolutely zero idea Baro was going to do anything, and if not for Baro smashing that visualization, Loki very much would have crushed that goal scoring opportunity. In the final play as well, using the Karasu system, Blue Lock literally gets driven into a corner, and if Isagi wasn't there to switch it up, Hiyori would have been dispossessed and it would have been game over. Isagi saw all of this coming though, including who the French players would mark, since he knew going into this play that he'd be facing off against Hugo, and that's what makes him a step above Karasu. Karasu's visualizations are great, don't get me wrong, but he's not Isagi. Isagi right now is like a character with all around great stats, but can't use their best stats because the team they're on is lacking. Honestly, in my opinion, Isagi is a step above all of the Blue Lockers right now, and if he wasn't, then he wouldn't have to be dictating the plays all the time as a striker. People always like to claim Isagi is a midfielder because of how much he drops back and play makes, but Isagi is not doing this by choice. He's doing it out of necessity because he knows his teammates can't. I'd say the best example or comparison I can use to highlight what I mean is Onansi. He had to constantly leverage his own skills and overperform to compensate for his teammates, and that's exactly what Isagi has to do as well. With all this laid out, I think it's clear that Isagi is an absolute monster. For most of the series, he's effectively been running around with weights on and still has been putting up all-star performances. So hopefully once Sai joins, we'll be able to see a glimpse of an Isagi who doesn't need to play conductor all match, he can instead just work alongside the conductor to be an unstoppable force. If you made it this far into the video, I just want to say thank you so very much for watching. If you like what I had to say or simply learned something new, be sure to like and subscribe, it really helps the channel. And with that being said, I hope you all have a great rest of your day, or night whenever you're watching this, and I'll see you all next time.